All right, we are on to the testimony that started yesterday, November the 9th. These are the wiretaps. Now, I'm going to go ahead and warn you, there's going to be several parts to these. The best way that I can think to do these is to just read them. The excerpts that I can find online, I think the best part would be, or the best course of action would be to just read these, because there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of keeping straight who's talking to who, and we will just do it that way. So heads up, a lot of parts. Sorry, I don't have a better reading voice, but here we are. So, like I said, these were wiretaps that were taken while the family was living in South Webster after returning from Alaska in 2018. I believe these started in May of 2018. The ones that we're going to hear anyway. They involve George, Jake, and Angela, and Beth, Jake's wife. I didn't hear any others. If there were, I didn't hear them. So those are the main players here that conversations were heard from. They, of course, were arguing over the children. Billy, when they talk about Chris, they're talking about Chris, Angela's half-brother, not Chris Sr., who was murdered. This testimony was presented by Julia Evslage. I still can't say her last name, the BCI agent who was the phone expert. She was probably real sick of sitting there by the time of these ended, because this was, I think, all day. The first call presented was between Jake and his then wife, Elizabeth Armour, in which they discussed allegations leveled against Beth that she'd inappropriately touched Sophia, which was in Beth's testimony. In the call, Beth says it's not really sustainable to live under this kind of suspicion. Jake defended his mother a little bit, explaining to his wife that Angela was just worried about the allegation and trying to comfort Beth by telling her everything would be okay. Beth says it's really difficult. Like, she thinks I'm worse than a murderer, and you're so willing to believe it. Like, jumping to believe that I'm worse than a murderer. All relationships are built by trust and destroyed by distrust, and this kind of distrust, it's eating away at my soul. Jake apologized for his mother's attitude toward Beth, and the call ended. Angela Canepa played the next clip, in which Jake and Beth continued to discuss the dynamics within the Wagner household, especially between Beth and her mother-in-law. They began the conversation by telling Beth it didn't matter what Angela thought of her, Jake began it, because Jake loved her, and that's what he thought mattered the most. She says, but I live with her 5 days out of the week, and you 2 days out of the week, so it doesn't really matter, Beth said. Head to part 2. Wiretap video, part 2. So Beth had argued, I live with her 5 days out of the week and you 2 days out of the week, so it doesn't actually matter. She said this twice. Jake tried to explain that Angela didn't really hate her, but needed time to let her guard back down with Beth. After his daughter's claim, which wouldn't happen overnight, Beth sounded near tears as she told him that the kids didn't understand why they had to stay away from her, putting her in an awkward position when they wanted to play with her, because Angela would freak out if the kids came anywhere near her. She says, so I told you Sophie keeps trying to close me in the bedroom. If I would not be paying attention 100% of the time, and if she was to succeed and close and lock the door for more than 1 minute, your mom would see that as a possible time that I could have been abusing Sophie. I am I'm literally constantly on edge and constantly watching. Jake promised her he'd speak with his mother and find a way for the couple to make things work in the long run. He encouraged Beth to speak with Angela herself and express her concerns directly. I don't know what fucking good that was going to do. But Beth argued that would prove pointless. Beth says, if you had a snake in your house and she sees me as a snake, you wouldn't care one bit how the machete you swing affects the snake. And she is 100% correct. At the end of the conversation, before they hung up, Beth sighed and told Jake she felt like she was living in Nazi Germany. So the next conversation was between Jake and his mother about Beth. They were yelling and arguing in this one, and Jake actually stands up to his mother. Angela was complaining that Beth had walked to the library again. She said, what is she doing there every day for 3 to 4 hours? Jake said she was using the internet to fill out job applications and print and fill them out for different places in the area, trying to find a job. Angela started yelling that Beth couldn't look for certain jobs in certain towns because she would be recognized by family members or others who lived there. I guess she was looking for jobs in like Memphis, Ohio and Jackson, Ohio. And Angela went on a rant. And the family members that she's talking about here are not Wagner family members. These are members of Tabby's family. Because at this point, they were just like a week away from it being 1 year since Tabitha had seen her son, which would be abandonment and help them get permanent full custody of Bovine. Beth was really concerned that Angela was really concerned that Beth had gone up there and got a library card using her address, and she was mad because they were supposed to be lying low. Jake told her he didn't understand why Beth trying to find a job was a big deal. Angela says, well, I thought it was a big deal. Saving our butts and keeping the kids safe, I thought it was a big deal. Now, the Angela in these recordings is very different from the Angela that we've seen in the courtroom, but we done knew that. So head over to part 3. Quick video, I lost one while I was filming all those because I was filming them, adding them to my drafts, and then I was going to post them all like in order so that I didn't bog down my recording, because what happens is it like slows down and then it doesn't catch a lot of audio. But in doing so, I lost part 3 of day 1, unless I mislabeled it. I'm not rewatching myself talk because that sounds terrible. So if there is some stuff missing, sorry. It's probably, I'm going to go on a limb, and from the first day, it is George and or Angela and or Jake arguing about Beth, because that is literally all we covered. But I genuinely hope it's not the one where Jake yells back at his mom. If it is, I'll re-record it because that was pretty good. So if they're out of order, I'm sorry. I recorded like 17 parts in a row and I'm uploading them. So hopefully they post in order. Hopefully the audio doesn't get muted, whatever. Let me know if there's a problem, if there's anything major missing, and I will fix that. See you later. Wiretaps, part 4. So Angela continues throwing a fit about a library card. She said, did she, meaning Beth, get a library card to go up and use that stuff? And she pointed out that Beth had taken mail with her during one walk to the library. Jake said he didn't know, and Angela got mad. She said she thought the family was supposed to be lying low. Jake told her he didn't understand why her finding a job was such a big deal. She then got angry at Jake and started yelling at him that he had hidden his truck, given several belongings away, and told the family to stay in hiding. Jake told her she was getting overly emotional and needed to take her hormonal medication. And this is from a hysterectomy. And Angela completely flipped the fuck out. Yelled at Jake, told her she wasn't crazy, that her expensive medication was for her fibromyalgia, not for her hormones, and that her hormones weren't making her crazy, that Jake had done enough damage. She then began to yell at Jake over his telling Sophia that Angela was the girl's grandmother, not her mother. She was also angry Jake was choosing to believe Beth over Sophia, putting his daughter in further danger. To which Jake did tell her, you are their grandmother. Because Angela was pissed off that Sophia told Bovine. Angela was mocking this, saying, Beth is her mommy, I'm her grandmother, Beth didn't do anything wrong, it was just Sophie. After Jake told his daughter that Angela was in fact grandma and not mom, Angela said Sophie now prefers Beth to her, and told Bovine that Angela was her grandmother, which confused Bovine. And quote, now Bovine has 50 million questions wanting to know how it is that I'm Sophie's grandmother. Jake says, how did I do damage, Mom? You are not her mother. Again, why is Jake the fucking voice of reason here? But they yelled at each other for a while before the call disconnected. Angela was super fucking pissed off. And when trying to stiff arm Jake didn't work, she would revert to manipulation techniques. Anybody that has any doubt whatsoever about Angela being the one calling the shots for this and thinks that somehow stupid meth head Billy came up with this, all you need to do is look up these wiretaps, because these were played in court, so they are on YouTube. All you need to do is go listen to this girl, this woman, run her fucking mouth to know she was pulling the fucking strings. They argue some more. Jake says, Mom, you told me that I should tell her that Sophia, that you're her grandma. Angela said she didn't say that, whatever. So either don't trust Sophie or kick my wife to the curb. Is that what you said? Argued Jake. So, yeah, that's pretty much what she said. So Angela sucks. Head over to part 4. Just kidding, it was part 5. So, wiretaps, part 5. Angela in the same call then accused Beth of snooping because when she told Jake, Angela put Sophia to bed one night because Jake wanted Sophia to call him before she went to bed. Beth had called Jake and said that Suds was going to bed, and Jake called Sophia, and Angela basically said that Beth was a snooper and I don't like snoopers. Jake said she's not snooping. I told her to tell me when Sophie went to bed so I could call and tell her goodnight. She did exactly what I told her to do. They argue over it. They said there's a misunderstanding. Jake yells and says, I told her to do it, Mom. Then he said, Angela argued that every time she tried to prove Beth was a liar, Jake called it a misunderstanding. She says, how many misunderstandings are there going to be, Jacob? I told you I would not trust her. Jake tells his mother again she needs his medication or she needs her medication, and that she basically is insane and needs to be medicated for this. And Angela got super fucking pissed. She told Jake that Beth talked about him behind his back, calling him naive, dumb, and saying he doesn't know how to be a father to Sophia, and George doesn't know how to be a father to Bovine, which is fucking accurate. People are not trustworthy. You should know that. Angela ended with. Jake responded that Angela doesn't trust anyone besides the 4 of them, and there was no stone cold proof against Beth. They continued arguing about Beth and whether she should be trusted. Jake continued to defend Beth and admonished his mother for insulting his wife every day. And then that was the end of that recording. They yelled. Some of this was hard to understand because they just would not stop fucking yelling. The next recording was a conversation between George and Jake while they were traveling in their semi-truck delivering for R&L carriers. In the conversation, George accused Jake of choosing Beth over his daughter, and the two yelled at each other. Recording was difficult to hear between the truck and them screaming at each other. He was arguing that Jake didn't put Sophia first, that he put Beth first, that when he came home, he hugged Beth first, not his child. He told Jake that he needs to tell her, no, that's my kid. I'm going to spend time with her instead of you. George said, you believe a freaking whore over her. Jake said, you will not insult my wife. Jake said, I will insult your wife. You're just too fucking blind. You swore up and down you would never let a woman come between you and Suds. George kept yelling, telling Jake that he was putting Sophia on the back burner. They then started arguing about religious beliefs, whether Jake trusted Beth to take care of his daughter if they all were sent to the electric chair. Wiretaps, part 6. So, like I said, Jake was in the truck with George. This is a wiretap from their semi while they were driving for R&L carriers where they drove cross country. George and him were arguing religion now because these seem like the two people that need to be arguing fucking religion. They argued about whether Jake trusted Beth enough to care for his daughter if they all were sent to the electric chair. Jake said he wouldn't want Beth to have Sophia, but not because he didn't trust her. Instead, it was because she hadn't been married to him long enough to know how he would want Sophia raised. That was the end of that recording, but the next one is the same thing. It is Jake and George in the truck and another fight. This time George yelled at Jake because now he had to explain things to his son as a result of something Jake told Sophia. The two argue loudly and the audio is difficult to make out. George calls Beth the most jealous little girl I've ever seen before threatening to rat Jake out to BCI because every time I try to do something, you rat me out. Mama's boys are fighting over mommy. The next recording is from June 2nd, 2018. This is George and Angela. Angela told George they needed to have a family meeting about BCI's investigation, and George became angry, shouting that the Wagner family needed to expose BCI and the Pike County Sheriff's Office for being crooked cops. He said, if you do not fight back, you do not stand a chance. They're not going to do these scare tactics with me. I will wreck their freaking world. Jake's favorite word is, God, these names are so similar. George's favorite word is frickin', apparently. The two then, this is Angela and George. They argued about money needed to pay attorneys. Angela said, we don't have money like we used to. The insurance money George should have gotten after his vehicle was crashed. This was the crash that Jake and Chris Newcomb, Angela's brother, did to total a truck on purpose for the insurance money. Angela accused her half-brother Chris of cashing in on the insurance and going shopping instead of paying George, although George said Newcomb knew what George was owed and would pay him. Later that same day, George and Angela were on the phone again. They were speculating that BCI agents could be responsible for the gossip about the murders on the social website Topics. Totally forgot Topics even existed until this case came back up. I lived for this Topics page. And if you know, you know, Smiley is Ryan Scheiderer. You will not convince me otherwise. George, of course, told his mother to tell the world about what the law enforcement had done, including drugging the children at the border, and said they will crumple and they will break if the family retaliated by releasing this corruption information to the media. Head over to I think it's 7. Wiretaps, part 7. We are halfway down this page. So this is George and Angela on the phone talking about Topics. He told his mother to out BCI to the public and the Pike County Sheriff's Office for what they had done in their corruption. I mean, he's not wrong, but also you fucking did it. So yeah, there's that. He told his mother every time she and Billy got in trouble with law enforcement was because someone caved. George says, I'm not going to cave and I'm not going to crumble, which also, to be fair, he didn't cave. I thought it was going to be him, but it was Jake. He continued to level threats against the investigators, shouting on the phone calls, sometimes over Angela. She tried to calm him down. He made all kinds of threats against Ryan Scheiderer, threatening to kill him, hurt him, etc. One audio recording played for the jury was simply George uttering one line from the semi-truck. He says, yes, Ryan, I know you're listening to this, which was obviously referencing Ryan Scheiderer. On June 9th of 2018, Angela and Jake spoke on the phone while George chimed in from the background of the call. So this one would have been after the 1-year mark. I'm pretty sure that it was June 7th, which would have been considered the abandonment of Bullvine. This is June 9th. It is Angela and Jake. George is in the background of the call, so he can hear it. I assume it's on the speaker in the truck or just on speaker in general or something. Angela says, I have a feeling we're running on borrowed time, referencing the BCI agents closing in on them. Jake and Angela talk briefly about Beth, with Angela encouraging Jake to let her hire a private investigator to look into his life's history. The suggestion angered Jake, who bitterly told her to go ahead and do whatever she wanted. Angela pointed out that every time she was asked about wrongdoings, Beth's answer was too quick and too perfect, which Angela believed indicated she was lying to them. Jake then pointed out that he had been accused of the same thing during an interview for his answers being too quick, too perfect, and told that he was lying. So at this point, I'm pretty sure his method to convince himself that he didn't actually do this was starting to like kick in, because he said, well, they thought I was lying. Bitch, you were lying. Anyway. During the conversation, George could be heard yelling in the background, taking his mother's side and arguing with Jake's account of the journal entry. George said Beth could be, this is about the journal entry that Beth made about the 15 things that she hated, or the 6 things she hated about Angela, and could tell police that her mother-in-law was responsible in the murder. But Beth conceded in that same entry that it would be awful and a lie. So go to part 8. All right, I kind of messed up. I think we're on part 8. So they are talking. This is a phone conversation between Jake and Angela, but George is in the background adding his unnecessary commentary. They are talking about Beth and her journal entries, talking about what a piece of shit Angela is, for lack of a better way to put it. And George could be heard yelling in the background, taking his mother's side and arguing with Jake's account of the journal entry. George said Beth could be a witness and get the whole family arrested, which called that, didn't you, bud? So I'm sure he was real happy when Beth came in that courtroom that day. Let's see. Conversation then shifted to discussing what would happen if members of the family were arrested for the murders. If she wasn't married to Billy and didn't have to care for Bullfine and Sophia, Angela told her son she wouldn't do life in prison. She said, quote, "I'm not taking a life sentence, Jake. I'm just going to take the electric chair and die." And she said it would be her choice if BCI framed the family. And then Jake says, "Well, Mom, I love you, but you got no balls. You're taking the easy way out." That's fucking rich coming from the one that flipped and started fucking talking, isn't it? Jake asked George what he would do, but his brother responded he'd choose the electric chair too, but planned to take officers out with him on his way out. Angela said, "You need to stop talking about this stuff on the phone." And Jake said, "I know they're listening." In the background, George began to rant about how he wanted to kill Ryan, referring to Ryan Shutterer. Jake yelled, "George, shut up." Angela told Jake she'd speak with him when they were home because I don't want these idiots to hear every single thing that I say. Next conversation, June 12th, 2018, George and Angela on the phone discussing Beth and their concerns about her. George says, "I'm telling you, Mom, there's something up with her." Angela agreed, and Beth had a terrible fit that day, telling her Jake didn't need his wife because he had Angela and he could pay prostitutes for the one thing he didn't get from his mother. George told Angela he wanted witnesses around while she was home with Beth because he worried for Angela. When there couldn't be another person around, George told his mother, "Go in the room, lock the door, keep that thing with you. Don't trust that girl." I assume that thing means a gun. The two speculated as to whether Beth was planning to leave Jake, and George said he believed the only reason she hadn't was because she had no money and no car. The next conversation was later, I don't know what it was. Angela and George, after BCI agents had begun to ask the family members about a photo depicting a hand holding a 1911 .22 caliber Colt pistol. This is the one that was shown at Frederica's house that Beth identified as Jake's hand, and they got pissy with her about it. Basically, they were both very anxious during this call. They said some other things, whatever. But they were both super anxious, and George said they're making crap up. Go over to the next part. I think it's part 9. Wiretaps, part 9. This is still the first day of wiretaps. So the next phone call is from June 13th, 2018. Angela called George to tell him not to use his cell phone anymore and to tell his brother to do the same when he woke up. If he was arrested, he wasn't going to sign anything and should insist on having his attorney present. She said, "Don't even tell them your name." She emphasized that George had to tell Jake the same because Jake had been too friendly with BCI agents in the past. On the next day, on June 14th, Jake called his employer and told him that he and George had a family emergency and needed to cut their long-haul trip short and head home. So he called Angela spoke to George on the phone again later that day, complaining about Beth. They were on their way back from Dallas, or they were on their way to Dallas and then coming from Dallas back to Ohio. This time, Angela accused Jake's then wife of doctoring ice cubes in the freezer. Billy was at the house and she said that Billy put one in his mouth and immediately started gagging. Probably because it tasted like water and not like meth. Angela said, quote, "That ice tasted like nasty, disgusting medicine again. Your dad took a taste and about puked. He wouldn't even drink it." She and George gossiped about Jake's relationship with her and how to provide fail-safes against Beth gaining anything from the family as a result of her marriage to Jake. Also on this date, there was a wiretap conversation of Jake and George loudly discussing the list of firearms that were on Jake's phone that they referred to as a wish list, even though Jake testified that this was actually not a wish list. We all done knew that. And this was actually a list of guns the family owned. Let's see. "Don't make no more wish lists, Jake." I don't know. I don't think I'm going to, Jake said. "You and your frickin' wish list," said George. The phrase wish list was used at least 5 times in the brief recording, all by George. Still on the same day, Angela called George once again to discuss Beth. The two spoke about the photo of a hand holding a gun that had been shown to family while at the Flying W farm. Frederica said the hand in the photo was not Jake's, but Beth disagreed. Beth looks at her and says, "Yes, it is. That's Jake's thumb, all right." George responded, "She's full of crap." "I know that, all right. Better hope to God they don't call her to the stand." Haha, guess what, bitch? The prosecution played one final recording for the day, a nearly 40-minute long clip of Jake and George on June 26, 2018. Julia Evslage said the conversation was of George and Jake talking about Beth and their living situation, though the clip was incredibly difficult to understand. There was a lot of noise and the actual words were hard to make out. But at one point, George screamed at Jake, "I won't have my son in danger every day." Jake's part was harder to hear, but they argued about Beth and the allegations against Sophie on behalf of Beth. Go to the next part. Wiretaps part 10. This is going to wrap up the first day of them. George said, "My son is not a liar. Your wife is a liar and has been proven a liar time and time again." He actually screamed this at Jake. George accused Jake's then wife of leaving doors to their home unlocked on purpose and of lying about her whereabouts and actions when she walks to the library. Also true. George turned his vitriolic rant towards his brother later in the conversation, accusing Jake of screwing everything up for the rest of the family. George shouted, "You're the reason we're in this mess." He told Jake to get rid of her while you still can before continuing to berate him for making choices that harmed the family and led BCI on their trail. "We get electrocuted. I want you to realize it's your fault," said George told Jake. Court recessed after this because that's a good point to end on. And the next day they did a defense witness. And so the next day would have been today. Today's Thursday. So this was from yesterday. These 10 parts were the wiretaps that were played yesterday. If you want a word by word of it, you can watch it. And then there are some other summaries on YouTube that Pretty Lies and Alibis had a bunch of notes because she has someone in the courtroom because, she's like an actual professional content creator and not some hairstylist passing out unsolicited advice on TikTok. It's just reading off the news. I'm reading off of WCPO, by the way. If you go read this, it's going to sound real fucking familiar because that's exactly what I just read. But they do a defense witness and then there is another wiretap. And then after that wiretap today, the prosecution rested. So we are fully into the defense side of the case now. And then once they're done, we will get to closing statements and closing arguments, whatever. And then we will deliberate and we will have a verdict and hopefully sentencing after that. So that is all for this part. I'm going to do the second day of wiretaps right now. So that will start over on the second day. So you can head over there and watch those if you want to, or I will see you all tomorrow when you want to catch up. Have a great night if I don't see you here in a minute.